think eventually the LNC is going to make it continue to make itself irrelevant if it doesn't grow some spine?
Well, they think they have spine.
Yeah, they think.
If you go to them and say you're not being courageous enough, they'll say no, we're courageous as hell. We dare go where no man has gone before, and they'll keep nominating, you know, Wayne Rooney. What's his business? Is it car salesman or something? What is it? It's some sort of salesman, right? This guy thinks he's going to be the next candidate here for president. It could happen. Unless there's significant change. Yeah.
I want to get back to your point about working outside the box.
Yeah.
I think libertarians have to work outside the box. When we talk in the confines of a political party, as some activists of the party keep reminding me, the purpose of the party is to elect candidates. And because of that, the rules of the game are constrained by federal and local regulation. They're constrained by how we're treated by our friends and our opponents, one of whom is big government media. And although it's very easy to say to somebody like a foundation, or a think tank, or a pressure group, you have to do something differently that you haven't done before. And I've seen the party has done the principled route, gotten 0.4%, and they've done the pragmatic route, gotten 0.4%. What I'd like to hear from you is where you think the party as a party should move outside the box and do something that is party-ish but different.
Yeah. Well, the premise of your question is that, not necessarily your premise, but the thing you referred to is this notion that the sole purpose of the party is to elect candidates. And that's a trap, I think, to frame the question. Because while one of our modes of behavior, in fact our sole mode of behavior in terms of to get people on the ballot and on candidates, etc., but there are other things to do besides electing some. First of all, we're not going to elect somebody President of the United States in 2012 or 16 or 20. I mean, I can barely formulate in my mind, and I've got a pretty good imagination, how it is over the next 12 to 16 years. We might be able to have a national LP candidate that might get 5% or 10% or whatever. We're fooling ourselves if we think we can just snap a finger and all of a sudden somebody's in the debates and is getting 30% of the vote, or is at Ross Perot levels. It's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a national candidate. Actually, that's the fundamental question. Why have a presidential candidate at all? And I think there are good reasons to do that. But it's not to elect somebody immediately. So there are other things going on here. Education has long been cited as a potential goal of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement in general. Let's get people reading these books. There's got to be some way that we can get people to essentially change their minds one person at a time. Or let's get people onto the web. The Ron Paul phenomenon is very instructive in this regard, because they had a significant web presence, almost overwhelming web presence at times. I mean, there were days when I would come in and turn on my computer and it was nothing but messages about Ron Paul, and that was very instructive, because it showed us how we can. There are methods here that we can use to establish a national presence that's not old school. So I think that can be done.
Like the truth?
Well, the truth is not enough. That's the problem. If the truth were enough, we would have elected somebody 20 years ago. And you're right that, in fact, it's not a question of whether or not the candidate is a purported purist or pragmatist. The comparison between the Badnarik and Barr campaigns is very interesting. Something I might get into at the end in my speech in January, because you essentially get the same result at the end with completely different approaches to the campaign. But when I say outside the box, I mean, for instance, issue-oriented activism on the local level, issue-oriented on the national level. The National Party seems to forget all about that. All they're concerned about and focused on is ballot access and funding that national LP campaign. They should be existing to help the states, not the other way around. In other words, the sort of top-down approach that they have now, I think it's not very pragmatic. It doesn't work very well. Because this is where the energy is, down here. I mean, it's sort of fun every 4 years to get together and drink a lot in a fancy hotel room someplace and nominate somebody and make believe we're a real political party. Okay, so they do that pretty well, and everybody gets shots and they go home and they talk about how wonderful they are. But the truth is, between those conventions, the real work of this party is done at the local level by groups like this. And until the National Party understands that the only way to really grow the party and really educate people and really get candidates elected is for that National Party to keep, they should be going to bed every night, the LNC members, thinking, how can we help the local affiliates? How can we help the Maricopa County Libertarian Party? How can we help those activists do something tomorrow? What is it that we can do to help them? They never think about that. I was on the LNC for a couple of terms, and it was one of the most discouraging activities of my life. Nothing got done. I mean, it really was it's funny because when I say they, I don't mean the evil empire, but they're a group of people who are constantly saying the party should not be a debating society. You ever hear that criticism?
Yeah.
Oh, you can't be a debating society. This is a real practical politics. The LNC is nothing but a debating society. Very little gets done at that level.
Yeah.
Very little. They're concerned about making their books match so that they don't go too far in debt, and hitting on some big donors, and putting on that convention every 2 years. That's about the end of their activism. And that is, I think, sad.
Okay. Thank you very much, John.